You ever wonder what happened to Rick and Morty?
Fuck no, baby!
One of my favorite videos about Rick and Morty on YouTube would have to be the one made by Imp Lemon, where he discusses the show's meteoric rise and the ramifications it had on the show's ever-growing fan base. At the time of that video's release, Rick and Morty was in between its 4th and 5th season. It had also just about completely lost all the steam it had been rapidly building up since the first season's finale. Because of that, said video ended on an optimistic note, that with Rick and Morty no longer having the expectations of being the smartest show on television, the writers now had the perfect opportunity to get things back on track, to course correct from where folks thought Season 3 had gone wrong. You had gotten the sense that the show had bought into its hype a bit too much, constantly being self-referential about its current place in pop culture. The world building and overall story progression was also all over the place. See, as the show went on, you saw them start to gradually hint at more and more lore for Rick. How did he become the smartest man in the universe? Is the Rick we're following actually from a different dimension to the one he currently resides in? Generally, just, what is his origin story? Something the series initially poked fun at with the Season 3 premiere, which finally answered these questions only to immediately point their middle finger at the audience and say, nah. It was the first time they had done it, it was kinda funny and charming, to know that the writers were also so aware of how much we wanted to see this. But with that, Season 3 continued, seemingly not wanting to evolve on any of the ongoing plot threads started in the previous. Which would be fine, if there weren't also other times where they were actively trying to hype people up with big reveals like evil Morty becoming president of the Citadel of Ricks. From there, you'd gotten the impression that the series would tackle more serialized elements, but they weren't gonna be happy about it. They would let you know continuously just how much they weren't eager to give the audience certain reveals, and in turn half-assed them as much as possible. We're finally given Rick's backstory in full, in which we're told, oh, that fake one from the start of Season 3? No, okay, sure, that's what actually happened, whatever.
Whoa, dead wife? Yes, now everyone can shut up about it.
This apparent resentment towards their audience continued until, well, the creator was fired, yikes. And so today, in 2024, Rick and Morty is currently in between its 7th and 8th season, and I think it's safe to say things didn't quite get back on track as well as people hoped.
Hey look, Morty! I'm a leg! A leg, Morty!
Not to say the show is bad now or anything, I'll talk about the actual quality of the series later, but I want to take some time to discuss the current state of Rick and Morty, how it lost its groove in a way, fell off, plus ratio. Subscribe, because at this point in time, I'd go out on a limb and say that Rick and Morty has never been more unpopular, especially in contrast to where it was back in Season 2 through 5, I want to say. I never see anybody talk about its most recent episodes, aside from, I don't know, Johnny Two Cellos doing God's work over there. And so let's talk about why. As sadly, I don't think it's just because of the show itself. But first, I want to take some time to talk about today's sponsor, Pretty Litter. This video is sponsored by Pretty Litter. I live with a cat. He pays me rent, so I don't judge. And might I say, one thing that certainly helped with that was Pretty Litter. When a cat's healthy, they're happy. And so it's great to know that Pretty Litter lets me keep tabs on my cat's health with these ultra-absorbent crystals that not only trap odor instantly, which mitigates the smell of a bathroom, which I find most helpful. Not only do they last up to a month, meaning less time spent scooping and going to the garbage, as well as the crystal BS minimizing mess or dust, but also the coolest part is the crystals change color to help monitor early signs of potential illness, including kidney issues. These can literally be life-saving. Pretty Litter ships free right to your door in a lightweight bag, so not only do you not run out of it, but it also doesn't take up too much space in your house. So be sure to go to prettylitter.com/LSMark and use code LSMark to save 20% in your first order. And you get a free cat toy. Wow. So once again, be sure to check them out in the comments or description below, and thanks Pretty Litter for sponsoring this video. This poor cat lost an eye you have to support. I, like many people, was obsessed with Rick and Morty back in its first 3 seasons. I would watch the episodes on repeat, show them to my friends, even started buying the merch once the comics and memorabilia began filling up stores. Season 3 is definitely when I noticed the drop-off, which I think was inevitable based on how monumentally popular the second had been. With the year-and-a-half wait raising everyone's expectations, it was natural that some wouldn't be satisfied. But it was damn near universal. It seems like most agreed that something about the series just felt off. Something had changed. And whether that be Justin Roiland taking a step back to focus on other projects, new flurry of writers being brought in and going through the obvious growing pains that come with that, or maybe it was simply the high expectations putting pressure on them which resulted in overthinking. But no matter what the reason, the outcome remained the same. Rick and Morty was on a downwards climb to mediocrity. For every season that had one or two genuinely fantastic episodes, the majority was still filled with confusing attempts to recapture what had come before, without really understanding why what came before was so groundbreaking. Rick and Morty coming out on the, at the time, not as mainstream Adult Swim, at least when compared to other networks adult animations came out on, resulted in it feeling like a bit of an underdog. It had a pretty niche fan base, relative to what it eventually led to, I guess. And because of that, I think fans of the series felt a sense of connection to it, especially given its more improvisational humor oftentimes breaking the barrier between the creatives and the viewer.
It's called Two Brothers. Two Brothers. It's just called Two Brothers.
Because of that, having a new set of writers come in was bound to shake things up. And given Roiland's dwindling involvement, that improv comedy that it had become so well known for couldn't really be recaptured. It felt as if the writers were now trying to capture his voice in their scripts, which made certain moments come off as forced randomness. Like Pickle Rick. This obviously made the show more sustainable. I think every fan of the series can remember the drought between season 2 and 3. It was excruciating, especially having to wait another 3 months between the first and second episode. But ironically, I think that wait, while of course not being ideal and showcasing the detriments of the perfectionism taking place within the team, only made people more excited for what was to come. You know, what are they cooking? Which was helped by the fact that season 3's premiere left such a big impression on viewers, promising to take the duo into their darkest adventures yet. See, this only works though when the wait is actually worth it. As the silence lingers, expectations only grow. And for a lot of people out there, the large gap didn't seem justified when looking at the end product. How is it that season 1 and 2 can release at a pretty consistent pace, yet the extra wait for the third didn't yield a better batch of episodes? Arguably, the quality went down. And because of that, I think it's why the wait between season 3 was a little more egregious. Oh great, another 2-year wait for a series of episodes we can't even guarantee will be any good. Perfect. That Vet episode was pretty great though, even I have to admit. Despite the new team finally getting things back on track and pumping episodes out on a consistent yearly basis, the damage had been done. A new Rick and Morty season was no longer an event, especially given their decision to course correct and cut season 4 in half, releasing the first 5 episodes and the next 5 episodes 5 months apart. The show now chugging along at a consistent pace made it so there was not nearly as much excitement or discussion. It's now just expected that every year we're going to get a new season of Rick and Morty, whether we want it or not. And while that's undoubtedly a good thing, don't get me wrong, I think the noticeable fluctuations in quality made more people slowly start to drop off and lose interest. I got as far as the dinosaur episode in season 6 before calling it quits, and it wasn't even a case of the episode being so bad that I just couldn't stand to watch it anymore. Instead, the next episode released and I just thought to myself, I'll get around to it. And we all know when we say that, we're not gonna get around to it. The seal of watching each new Rick and Morty episode the day it released, because it's Rick and Morty, why wouldn't ya, had been broken. Because the show really gave me no reason to want to keep watching. Watching through the series all at once without the yearly breaks really shows you just how much of it hadn't been planned out. Not that that's an issue or anything, I think looking back it's fairly easy to tell this was always envisioned as a more episodic series, but unfortunately they did such a good job at intriguing the audience that it became expected for them to continue it, like they had some grand plan to explore. Like, you watch the episode that introduced Evil Morty, and you almost get the idea that it was designed as nothing more than a funny end gag, that Evil Rick was actually a robot and it was his seemingly innocent Morty behind it all. However, they executed that so well that now audiences around the world can't help but ask, where did he go? And when's he gonna come back? You can really tell this through the fact that Evil Morty didn't show up at all in the second season. The series instead kept taking itself in bolder, different directions. With another silly scenario, they play completely straight. You know, what if Summer's random friend who only appeared a handful of times was actually an undercover agent working for the Galactic Federation? It's as if it took the entirety of season 2 airing with no Evil Morty in sight for the crew to realize just how much people wanted to see his return. And so now they have to scramble to figure out what his plan could possibly be, it taking us until season 5 for that to even be revealed. It's just an unlucky position to face when the things fans latch onto most is the lore. Endless theories and discussions about the inner workings of the universe that hadn't really been figured out yet. Like, great, people wanted to see the return of Tammy so bad that I now have to try and take her seriously as a villain. And it's because of that, and I'm not sure if anyone else feels the same way, but at times when this stuff does come back and they take it seriously, it can feel a tad forced. trying to pay these plot threads off in massive battles with spectacle galore. Perhaps it's just because of how much they make it clear that they resent the audience for wanting this compared to silly adventures.
Fine, I could eat. But the second he reveals he's evil, we're gone.
But then, they also seem to take an issue with the opposite sentiment too.
Do some classic adventures, like season 1.
I'm so sick of that f***ing note. What the f*** does it even mean?
At least now it seems as if they have a pretty solid idea of the tone they're going for, along with how much they want to focus on story versus episodic stuff. Only took them a decade. It still doesn't help the issue, however, that the unique voice the series initially had has been all but lost. Not even directly turning into something worse, just different. Obviously, I don't think anyone is arguing that Justin Roiland shouldn't have been fired from the show, that goes without saying, but at the same time, it's hard not to notice his absence, even before the firing. The guy went on to create Solar Opposites for Hulu, which I'm sure took away more of his attention, and if you look at the writers, it seems as if Roiland's involvement in the show started drifting as far back as the second season. Who knows though, it appears that Solar Opposites co-creator Mike McMahon was more hands-on compared to Justin, so what the fuck do I know? All I do know is, Rick and Morty simply suffered from having its identity be so intrinsically associated with Justin Roiland's sense of humor and voice, like his literal voice, that sadly, no matter how good the replacement writers or voice actors were, and I mean, they are good, but it could have been 1-to-1 and people still would have been upset. Hardcore fans especially. People aren't fond of change, and the confirmation that Rick and Morty's creator had been pretty much blacklisted from ever taking a single step in its direction in any way ever again was enough for a lot of folks to write off whatever the series does going forward. It's not true, Rick and Morty! And it's a shame because Season 7, our first season without Roiland in any way, shape, or form, wasn't that bad. It still peels in comparison to the show's golden age in my opinion, but compared to a lot of other stuff on TV right now, really isn't without merit. That's not to say it's amazing or anything, honestly some of these episodes are pretty terrible, like giving Mr. Poopy Butthole a starring role in the premiere.
Bet you didn't expect to see me in a cold open, huh?
It's another one of those things where fans got so amped to see when he'd return, despite the joke after his introduction basically being that he would only appear once a season where he'd update you on how his life is going. When you start giving him more focus, it kind of ruins the bit and makes you realize, oh, this isn't even a character I want to follow around for an entire episode. Maybe that's just me though, he's definitely one of the characters that suffered the most from the change in voice actors that can never not sound like someone doing a poor imitation. You know, I like that Solar Opposites got around this by replacing the character with a voice actor who sounds nothing like Justin.
I told you not to throw metal around here. We're going to be late to work. Stop buggering about.
They also did this just awful episode where they, once again, try to expand upon a simple joke from the early seasons, noticing a pattern here. Did you find it funny in Season 2 when Ice-T revealed he was actually an intergalactic being that's just a giant letter T? Kinda, I guess. Well, how would you like an entire episode not about our main characters, and instead about he and Morty's teacher having to team up to take down these evil numbers where they continuously wink at the audience for all their lame plot twists and point out how basic and played out the story is? No, I don't really want that. I sure do love puns about letters and numbers. I'm 7. However, in contrast, there are episodes here that I think are genuinely great, such as this sudden reveal of Evil Morty's backstory and what he's been up to since escaping the central finite curve, as Rick and Morty try and find the Rick that killed his wife. Again, it's clearly being made up as they go along, but without the constant sneering at the audience for being invested, it surprisingly enough becomes way easier to be invested. Shocker. Actually makes the moment where he confronts Rick Prime and beats him to death way more impactful and shocking. They actually showed some restraint, I was surprised. And the ending, where we see him go through a similar moment to Morty when he finally lost his innocence, was executed extremely well, and creates so much more intrigue for where to take the character going forward. Also enjoyed the finale a lot, which sees his dead wife Diane seemingly return, which he slowly lets consume him despite the knowledge that it's almost likely fake. It was like doing something new, which is more than I can say about a lot of the middle seasons. It actually left me a little excited as to where they could take the series in the future. Ending was super unexpected too. I'd actually recommend watching it if you haven't seen the show in a while. Again, it's different, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I'd rather them go in this new direction than continue to linger in uncertainty. But sadly, like I've already said, the damage is done. Most people who dropped off the series aren't interested in picking it up anytime soon. In a lot of ways, it was merely a fad, moving on to the next big thing, which in this case seems to have been Smiling Friends, in which people will eventually move on to the next thing, and then the next thing, and eventually, they'll remember Rick and Morty and think to themselves, do they still make that? No series could survive what happened to Rick and Morty without coming out the other side a different show, so in some ways you can't exactly blame them for not knowing what to do. I'm a bit stunned actually. I was fully expecting to make this video and end it by talking about the show's continued drop in quality, but if watching Season 7 has taught me anything, it's that there's still a lot to enjoy about Rick and Morty, when it's actually being Rick and Morty. Who knows where the series will go after their contracted 70-episode order is up. But if there's one thing I can say for certain, it's that I'm so glad they realized how unfunny Pickle Rick was.